I'm very proud. I will always say, and in my ministry, I'll always say where I came from. And that was Manchester started me along the way. And I was interviewed by the Church Times a couple of weeks ago, and the reporter was very surprised how I felt I hadn't suffered any racism within my, as they put it, my church career, my ministry so far. And I think from when I started in Manchester, I was under the scheme of SEAMS. And then I worked in other little different pockets in the diocese and met many people, the FFM and other things that go on. And I'm very proud that I never felt like that. I was speaking to Nick Smeaton, the DDO, and he said we're doing okay with diversity. How do you think we're doing with diversity and with what's going on within our diocese? Because there's a lot of different minorities, isn't there, in our diocese?
There is. It's about being intentional about the way we behave. One of the things I set up as soon as I arrived in the diocese was that we would not have major diocesan events at the cathedral with 3 white British faces stood behind the altar, in the same way we wouldn't have 3 male faces behind the altar. That at the big events in the life of the diocese, that the diversity that we are has to be very visible and very high profile. Also, that we have no recruitment processes for senior vacancies in the diocese with an all white or an all male or an all particular churchmanship panel being responsible for that recruitment process, and that if I don't think recruitment processes are properly searching for UK ME people, then I will be pushing back and saying I think the search needs to go on a bit longer, or it needs to be done a bit harder, because we've got to find ways of ensuring that the people who we consider for senior positions, as for any other position, are reflective of the diversity of the community that we're part of. I think we are now in a position where something around 20% or so of those who we're sponsoring for ordination and training come from UK ME backgrounds, and that plus who some of us are people who are being ordained, and that includes stipendiary ministry in particular. Some of that has meant working with the theological education institutions to ensure that we can have pathways for training that are appropriate for people whose first language isn't English, because some of our minority ethnic groups, English is very much a second or maybe even a third language that they're speaking. So how do we support people appropriately through the process of discernment and training and ordination, to produce the kind of diverse leadership the church will need in generations to come, as well as making sure that we're considering people who are ready for senior positions here and now. I
think as I'm going into ministry, I went to a BAME conference, which I was asked to go by Nick in 2017, and I was surprised to know, bar John Sentamu, the Archbishop Emeritus, there was if I'm rightly thinking, there's no black diocesan bishops. There's a couple, we've got about 5 BAME suffragan bishops, but no diocesan bishops. I hope and pray, Bishop, in the years to come, that there will be a shift in pattern of what's going on there. I'm presuming you would like to see that shift too, to have more diversity in your colleagues as diocesan bishops.
Yes, it increasingly feels strange and inappropriate for me to be in a large gathering of senior church leaders and it to be a almost entirely white group. That just doesn't feel right or appropriate or proper. We're missing something important, something necessary. I think we have a particular issue in the Church of England with regard to the appointment of diocesan bishops because of the role of the Crown Nominations Commission. And I think the present structuring of the Crown Nominations Commission is not going to deliver. And until we change that, we won't get the diversity of senior leadership that we actually require anything like the pace we need to get it. And I think that's largely because there's always a tension in any sort of democratic structure. I mean, part of the problem in the US is that often local police forces are headed by directly elected police chiefs, and democracy at its best enables the voice of the people to be heard. At its worst, it becomes simply the dictatorship of the majority. And I think what we sometimes find, because of the ways in which most of the members of the Crown Nominations Commission, apart from the two archbishops, are actually elected either by the General Synod or by the diocese, you can get situations where for a major diocese with a high number of UKME people in that diocese, there is not a single minority ethnic person on the Crown Nominations Commission. Certainly now that the previous Archbishop of York has retired, and I don't think that's acceptable at all. But as long as we have a system whereby that is an elected group, then we will tend to get the over-representation of majorities and the under-representation of minority groups.
I hope and pray that one day we can have that, and it all comes with time. I mean, we're in one thing that's happened. I was talking to somebody else on a video the other day. A lot of things have happened during this COVID crisis, and we've had what's happened in America with George Floyd, and it's coming over here, and its emotions have been heightened, feelings have been sometimes taken place, and it's been a really difficult time on many levels. Loss of lives. I think it's hard with the Black Lives Matter movement, along with the whole of COVID-19. Sometimes sit down, think, and reflect. I think in your own life, Bishop, because I know you're a husband, you're a father, you're a grandfather. How has it all touched you, seeing what's going on in the world? Just as David, because it must be, as you've got children and grandchildren, are you worried?
I do worry about the world that my generation is leaving for the next generation of people to inherit, that we've not moved fast enough on things that are actually crucial, whether it's on racism, whether it's on the environment. There are just ways in which we have been too slow because our self-interest has not necessarily been in favour of making a move. We know the present situation serves us well as individuals, meets our needs, makes our lives comfortable, and that we've not been sufficiently willing to suffer any sort of detriment to our own comfort in order to enable our societies to get to a better place for the future. And I think that's true across a whole wealth of the really big kind of wicked issues that the world faces, not just around COVID-19, not just around the environment, not just around Black Lives Matter. I think it's endemic. Typically, the crucial decisions are taken by the comfortable, and the comfortable will tend to take decisions that will keep them comfortable.
Were you part of the protesting through prayer, Bishop, that took place?
I took part in the protest through prayer evening. I think one of the things that we can do as Christians is we can pray, and every part of our life should be brought into our prayer life. I've never been ashamed of in my prayers of having a good discussion with God about things that might seem quite secular, whether it's which football team is going to win or whatever it may be. And I think something that really matters, rather more than football. I think we'd be crazy if that wasn't part of the agenda for our engagement with God, both our individual agenda for our relationship with God, but also for our corporate agenda. And therefore to say, well, actually, here's an evening when we're going to, our work of protest will take place through prayer. If protest matters to us, and it does, then prayer is one of the ways in which we will protect. We're both protesting to God and protesting with each other. Yeah. when we do that. And so I think to say that protest itself is a proper subject for prayer, a proper occasion to come together in prayer, is actually really rather important. It's not just a stunt. I think sometimes prayer events can be arranged purely as a stunt. It's 2 minutes of prayer and several hours of bringing people together into a place for it. Can be a little bit contrived, but an evening spent reflecting and praying, that's no stunt. That's genuinely holding that conversation with God at the centre and the heart of it.
It was, for me, I sat here in my study in Ridley Hall in Cambridge, and it was prior to doing the protesting through prayer, I bowed my knee into solidarity with George Floyd, with some other ordinands who'd stayed behind after the virus. And I've been speaking to a lot of BAME colleagues within our diocese, but also friends and family and whatever. And it was quite an emotional time, and it has been with the Black Lives Matter movement. But one thing I will say is that evening, it was very much centered with God and centered through prayer. And it sort of, there were people watching that on Facebook. I mean, it wasn't just a diocesan thing. There was tutors in my college in Cambridge watching it. My parents in rural Cambridge, people in Cornwall. It was something that people sort of virtually gathered in our diocese to join us. And it didn't feel just like it's a diocesan event. And it was very peaceful, and we had God at the centre, which was very beautiful in such a heightened and emotional time. I mean, given the wonderful vision at the end of the Bible of a great multitude that no one could count from every nation, tribe, people and language, worshipping together, what can we do as a church which will help us to prepare us, and prepare us for that beautiful destination of eternity shores?
Yes, one of the tasks of this life for all of us is and I reflect pretty well every day, that how does the life I'm living here on earth in any way ready me for the eternity of heaven? And I think that is it's a challenging question, because that makes me think about the level of intimacy with God and with others in heaven. How do I manage that when the people I perhaps mistreated fail to stand up for on this earth? So I think it's important for me that everything is kind of sub specie aeternitas in that sense. Everything is seen through that light of eternity, not simply through what we're doing at this particular moment. And so it is about, I guess, how we become more comfortable in each other's presence in diverse groups. And I think when I first went to Birmingham, when I first found myself as part of a community that wasn't almost entirely white, I think I learned a lot in that period of time that now makes it feel very strange not to be in a ethnically diverse group. But I think it's through relationship that we build those levels of trust, that level of mutual belonging, that desire to be with people who are not just like ourselves, and that it has to be worked at, particularly for those for whom it's not been what they've been brought up since as far back as they can remember. I know that kind of I still get a sense that that I need to go through a kind of almost conscious process in order to be anti-racist at a level that my kids don't, and my grandchildren certainly won't. No. Because they have been brought up in a different culture, in a different era. And just as I think of clergy who are a generation above me, who I remember being amused watching them being consciously anti-sexist. I mean, they got there, but you could almost hear the gears turning in their heads. I think sometimes you can probably hear the gears turning in my head when I'm reflecting on how to fully be anti-racist in this society, because it wasn't what I was brought up with. It wasn't the context. I was brought up in a context of very racist jokes on the television and the radio. It was still an era when you would have signs saying no blacks, no Irish, no dogs on lodging houses in parts of Manchester. And it felt strange, and one didn't quite know how to trust people who looked very different from one's own self. And so it takes a lot. None of us shake off our upbringing entirely. It takes a lot of hard work to be countering that. But for younger generations, I hope increasingly to be anti-racist is just natural. It's as simple. Like you breathe in. You don't have to think about it. It's just what you do.
Bishop David, I just want to thank you for your ongoing continued support for me and many ordinands of who are BAME, for your prayers and your support, and as you journey with us to the road to ordination. And I thank you personally for that and how I felt in the diocese.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you as part of the diocese, and I hope that it won't be too long before we're able to meet face to face again.
Brilliant. Thank you, Bishop David. Have a wonderful day, and thank you.